Amnesty International calls for an independent investigation into a Shiite mass grave in Nigeria. A high-profile diplomatic incident erupts as Kenya deports a group of Taiwanese accused of fraud to China. And Kanye West outdoes even himself as the life of Pablo makes history. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. A Nigerian public official is claiming that nearly 350 dead bodies were buried in a mass grave in northern Nigeria after clashes between the army and supporters of a Shiite cleric. Bella Babi Lawal, secretary to the state government in Kaduna, told an inquiry into the December clashes in the northern state that the bodies were taken from an army depot and buried in mass graves. The Nigerian army has previously said the Islamic movement in Nigeria had tried to assassinate its chief of staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, when members of the sect blocked his convoy in the northern city of Zaria in December. The following day, the army raided several buildings connected to the sect. Amnesty International says the claims should be investigated and anyone suspected of wrongdoing put on trial. The Shiite sect has previously said up to 1,000 of its members have been killed.
Our members killed by the Nigerian army should be released to us with immediate effect of burial according to Islamic rite. We call on the government to summon courage and live up to its morality and accept its crime by paying diya to all affected families and relations.
Now, for more perspective, I'm joined via Skype from London by Donatella Rivera, Senior Crisis Response Advisor at Amnesty International. Ms. Rivera, welcome to Africa 54.
Hello.
Now, you've looked at this case. There have been claims over time. Is there any evidence whatsoever that there is a location with mass graves?
Yes, there is a lot of evidence. I was in Nigeria a couple of months ago investigating specifically this incident in which hundreds of supporters of the Islamic movement of Nigeria were killed. And many more were injured. I visited the site of where the main alleged mass grave is in Mando, and there was clear indication of disturbed earth. We also obtained satellite imagery before the date of the killings and then after the date of the alleged burial, and it shows very clearly when there was this, when the earth was disturbed. So what we've seen on the ground is entirely consistent with the existence of a mass grave. We also spoke to many of the survivors, to witnesses from the neighborhood who are not supporters or sympathizers of the Shiite Islamic movement of Nigeria. We spoke to medical personnel, to the director of the hospital in Zaria, who told us that the army had requisitioned the whole area around the mortuary for a 2-day period, and that they had no access, but they could see army vehicles coming and going. We had several other testimony telling us that they had seen piles of bodies around the mortuary in the hospital compound. We spoke to many survivors at the 2 main locations where the protesters were killed, including people who had been injured and who were in these houses and who couldn't move, and then the places were set on fire.
Yes. Yeah.
So it is absolutely scandalous that the Nigerian army for 4 months has been denying that they have killed people. They accepted that they had killed about 7 people at the outset of the clashes, and then just a couple of days ago, they admitted that they buried 347 people in a mass grave. There was absolutely no need to do that. These people have families. Their families have been looking for them for months. So it is absolutely unjustifiable.
So what should be the next move? according to you?
Well, the next move is for any evidence that still exists to be preserved, because the Nigerian army has already destroyed a lot of evidence by burning down and bulldozing the places where people were killed, and then by burying the bodies in a mass grave. So now the mass grave should be exhumed in the presence of the family, with the input of professional people, forensic pathologists. Obviously, the victims need to be identified. Their loved ones are desperate to know, where the bodies are, and to gain access to the bodies so that they can give them a dignified burial. And there should be an investigation beyond the investigation which is ongoing. There should be an investigation specifically on this cover-up that went on for 4 months, where statements that were made by members of the army 4 months ago were quite plainly not telling the truth.
Well, Donatella, thank you very much for your insights. Yes.
Thank you.
Donatella Rivera is a senior crisis response advisor at Amnesty International. Now, nearly a dozen suspected militants from the terrorist group Al-Shabaab were killed in U.S. airstrikes in southern Somalia on Monday and Tuesday. Pentagon spokesman Captain Jeff Davies says those targeted posed an imminent threat to U.S. personnel. The strikes were carried out by unmanned aircraft. Last month, the U.S. military targeted an Al-Shabaab training camp in Somalia in an airstrike that the Pentagon says killed more than 150 fighters. The militant group, which seeks to impose a strict version of Sharia law, was pushed out of the Somali capital Mogadishu by the African Union peacekeeping forces in 2011, but has remained a potent force in the country. It has launched frequent attacks aimed at overthrowing the Western-backed government, targeting security government forces, hotels, and even restaurants. Now, a controversial decision by Kenya has turned into an international incident. China says it is investigating a group of Taiwanese nationals deported from Kenya for suspected fraud, pushing back against angry protests from Taipei over the deportations. A total of 45 Taiwanese nationals were sent to mainland China between Monday and Tuesday, all of them arrested in Kenya in 2014 and charged with cyber crimes. A Kenyan court dismissed the charges and gave the group 21 days to leave the country. Taipei has angrily accused Beijing of kidnapping its nationals by pressuring Kenya to deport them to China. But a spokesman for China's Taiwan Affairs Office says the group has stolen millions of dollars from Chinese citizens and businesses.
Since these crimes were committed overseas and all the victims are citizens from the mainland authorities will certainly perform the right of jurisdiction. Moreover, the related country has diplomatic relations with China. In order to make all the facts clear and to help the investigation, the Judicial Department of mainland China will investigate the Taiwanese criminals according to the law. The legal right and interest of all the criminals will be guaranteed according to the law.
Well, Kenyan Home Affairs Ministry spokesman Mwenda Njoka told VOA that it did not consult with Taipei ahead of the deportations. One of the current crisis stems from Taiwan's decades-long struggle to be recognized as an independent entity, separate and apart from China's rule. However, Beijing still claims Taiwan as part of its domain, and most governments across the globe, including Nairobi's, do as well. Now, for more insight into the deportations, Mwenda Njoka, spokesman for Kenya's Ministry of Interior, joins me live by Skype from Nairobi. Welcome to Africa 54, Mwenda.
Thank you.
Now, first, what do you make of this accusation that actually you've helped China kidnap Taiwanese?
No, a kidnap is not the right word. These were criminals who are here illegally. Besides being criminals, also here illegally. And they went through the due process of law. And when that was done, we deported them back to the port through which they came in. And they also needed China for other crimes.
Yeah. Now, so Taipei feels like you are cooperating with Chinese authorities. Did the government of Kenya bother itself with the idea that these are actually citizens of Taiwan?
Okay, one, as you rightly pointed out, we don't have diplomatic relationship with the Taipei, government of Taipei, but we have diplomatic relationship with China. And then on top of that, these individuals arrived in Kenya via China. So that is why we had to take them back there. So the issue of consulting the government in Taipei didn't arise.
Well, how serious do you think this is going to impact this relationship between Kenya and Taiwan? Of course, there's some interaction there, right?
Yeah, there is some interaction. But basically, we don't think it's going to be a big problem. What we see, we actually being dragged into an issue that should be between China and Taiwan. It shouldn't be more of a problem. Now that we've handed them over, they should be able to find ways and means of dealing with it rather than dragging us back into it. Our role is finished and we've moved on.
Well, Mwenda, thank you very much for giving us those insights.
Thank you.
Well, Mwenda Njoka is the spokesman for Kenya's Interior Ministry. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. Check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, fallout from the Panama Papers continues to grow. Stay with us for the details.
Health news and notes. This is Living Better.
He comes around and he checks out everybody, makes sure everybody's all right, brings down supplies.
That's Todd Hoddle, who's homeless, talking about Brett Feldman, a physician assistant who delivers first-line medical care to people living on the streets of Allentown, Pennsylvania. It's one of 60 such programs in the United States.
The whole movement has been gaining steam.
Street medicine helps to cut costs, says Dr. Brian Nestor of the Lehigh Valley Health Network, Feldman's employer.
It seems to be keeping those crises down, so they won't have to come into the hospital, where it'll cost us multiple times more.
Bridget Hammerstone is a recovering drug addict.
Someone like Brett is a blessing to me because he opens the door to allowing the light in for the first time in life, and it's real special.
Yeah. Very good.
I'm Martin Seacrest for VOA's Living Better.
The Panama Papers are likely to spark new prosecutions of people accused of providing funds to terror groups and boost political pressure to tighten financial rules in the United States. As VOA's Jim Randall reports, efforts to block terrorist financing are said to be getting more effective, but they're also causing collateral damage.
Terror attacks require money for explosives, travel, and weapons. Blocking funds for violent extremist groups is the key to reducing their threat. Terrorists used some companies incorporated in Panama to secretly move cash through firms with hidden ownership, and experts say the disclosures may fuel new prosecution efforts.
We know from the Panama Papers that there were terrorist organizations that were setting up these shell companies, Hezbollah, for example.
In Congress, a House committee has been holding hearings on terrorist finance. Justice Department officials say they are aware of the newest reports and are reviewing information. Former U.S. Senator Carl Levin says stronger rules for requiring disclosure of company ownership would help stop terrorist finances. In a newspaper article, he told officials not to waste the political opportunity fueled by public anger over the scandal. Senate Banking Committee member Elizabeth Warren urges the Treasury Department to also investigate. Experts say tighter rules make it harder to move money for terrorist operations, so terrorists move to older but harder to trace methods.
And that's what gets so challenging to track. I mean, the money changer in Mogadishu or the money changer in Tehran, how are they getting their money? Is it coming in suitcases rather than are they hiding it offshore in Panama? That's what the major concern is with the people that try to counter terrorism finance.
But legitimate charities that raise money for people in war-torn places are seeing banks abruptly close their accounts, making it difficult to pay staff and meet other expenses.
It's now to a point where a lot of the major Muslim-based charities in the U.S. that work internationally are one bank away from going out of business.
High risk and low reward make banks reluctant to have anything to do with organizations working in some conflict areas like Somalia. Banks tend to make very little money from charities' relatively small accounts, but in some cases have had to pay large fines for violating sanctions. It's all part of a fast-evolving, high-stakes financial battlefield. Jim Randall, VOA News, Washington.
We're turning now to business. The International Monetary Fund cut its global focus on Tuesday and warned of global stagnation. For the details, Africa 54 business correspondent Jill Malandrina joins us live from New York. Hi, Jill.
Hey, Vincent. The IMF released its quarterly outlook warning of global stagnation, and essentially it is saying that global growth has been too slow for too long. There are 5 main areas of concern outlined in the report, including slowing activity in advanced economies such as the U.S., rising emerging market stress, protracted period of low oil prices, the rebalancing process in China, and shocks of non-economic origin, such as geopolitical conflicts and epidemics.
Now, it is also reported that the World Bank loans are nearing crisis levels.
Yeah, it was a double whammy this week. Ahead of its half-yearly meeting in Washington, D.C., the bank said in a statement that demand for loans from the World Bank has reached levels unsurpassed outside of financial crises as developing countries struggle to cope with the weakness of the global economy. One of the World Bank's priorities is to end poverty, and it said that 2/3 of global poverty reduction in the last half-century had been the result of faster growth. So with it slowing, you can see the concern there, and this is why the bank uses its financial clout to support policies in developing countries.
Now, there was one bright spot in this IMF report, however, right?
Right, that's right. And while commodity prices are sensitive to Chinese demand, the IMF upgraded its China growth forecast by 0.2% for this year and the next, following signs of resilient domestic demand and growth in services that offset weakness in manufacturing. Now, Nigeria's President Buhari is visiting Beijing to secure greater support for Nigeria's infrastructure, and several new agreements to boost trade and economic relations will be signed. We've seen a steady stream of positive economic data out of China over the last several weeks, indicating that demand may not be as weak as some analysts expected, which is a very good thing for Africa's economy, as China is its largest trading partner.
Well, Jill, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, VOA Africa 54 business correspondent Jill Malandrino reporting live from New York. Now, the North African country of Morocco has been one of the few countries in the region to boast a relatively stable and secure environment despite looming terror threats. As a gateway between Europe and Africa, the country hopes to use its track record and geographic position to attract more foreign investment, particularly from the United States. Samia Erezuki reports.
Over 80 representatives from American companies have come to Morocco to participate in the 3rd annual Morocco-U.S. Business Development Conference. The conference aims to improve economic cooperation between the two historic allies. The U.S. companies represented were Ford, General Motors, and General Electric, among others. Morocco's Deputy Foreign Minister Mbarka Bouida presided over the opening session of the conference, highlighting, among other points, the main goals of this conference.
The objective of this conference is, of course, to make sure Moroccan investors will meet with American investors and to make sure we can give enough explanation and enough information to American investors about Moroccan economy, about Moroccan policies, generally speaking, and to make sure we can sustain the growth of American investment in Morocco.
Marcus Jadat, Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Industry and Analysis, delivered remarks emphasizing rich investment opportunities in Morocco thanks to its unique geographic position as a crossroads between continents and regions. In addition, Jadat highlighted the enduring ties between the countries.
For the United States, our relationship with Morocco is very important. As I mentioned earlier today, it is our first international relationship. Morocco is the first country to recognize the independence of the U.S. Today, it remains an important strategic and commercial relationship for the United States.
Participants reiterated that stability and security in Morocco are major incentives for enhancing U.S. investment in the country.
Recently, we heard from ambassadors in Washington about all the challenges facing the Arab world. Ambassador Dwight Bush, our ambassador to Morocco, said, "These are pretty good days in Morocco. We're experiencing unprecedented economic growth." So that's part of the story that I think will be told today, and I'll be doing my small part to support that view.
While this year marks the 10th year anniversary of the free trade agreement between Morocco and the United States, American investment in Morocco comprises only 4% of total foreign direct investment in Morocco. During the Morocco-U.S. Business Development Conference, members of the public and private sector recognized the weak business ties between the countries, expressing their aims at creating greater investment initiatives in the future. Samia Arazuki for VOA, Rabat, Morocco.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Rap superstar Kanye West smashes records and makes history with his latest release. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Activist and U2 frontman Bono is calling for swift action on the refugee plight. The singer took to Facebook for a live Q&A to discuss his trip to visit refugees in Africa and the Middle East. Bono also addressed a U.S. Senate panel that appropriates funds for America's outreach to the world. He noted that he was deeply moved by the humanitarian needs he saw and met. More controversially, Bono also suggested the Senate send comedians Amy Schumer and Chris Rock and Sacha Baron Cohen to battle the Islamic State with comedy. Now, when the audience laughed, Bono said, "I'm serious." Well, next up, a viral video campaign wants to change the conversation around the harsh reality of being a single woman in China. Japan-based cosmetics company SK-II released the video as part of the company's #ChangeDestiny campaign, which aims to empower and inspire women around the world. In the video, named Marriage Market Takeover, various single Chinese women discussed the pressure they receive from their families to marry and the judgment they experience in society for being single. And married females in their late 20s and older are often described in Chinese society as leftover women. On the other hand, unmarried men in China face less pressure to marry early and are normally less stigmatized. Well, and finally, drama over tweets, massive debt, and the Kardashians aside, Kanye West's The Life of Pablo, his seventh studio album, has debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts. It is the first album to top the Billboard charts, with the majority of its sales derived from streaming. The album was streamed 99 million times in the U.S., according to figures from Nielsen SoundScan. West first released Pablo on Jay-Z's troubled streaming service Tidal in February. Pablo was also released on platforms such as Apple Music and Spotify last week. Spotify says Pablo was streamed 50 million times in the U.S. in 1 week, accounting for half of the app's overall streams. And that is what is trending today. Now, Uber, the U.S.-based online transportation network company, operates a mobile app that allows consumers with smartphones to book cab services from drivers who use their own cars. Uber has launched its online car booking service in South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria. Now, meanwhile, in Ivory Coast, homegrown entrepreneurs are trying to stay one step ahead. Emily Eob reports from Abidjan.
Abidjan's distinctive orange taxis have been zigzagging through traffic here for decades, but recently, new competition has rolled onto the streets. In front of his house, TV producer Jean-Louis Zoibo hops into the unmarked car he ordered. TaxiJet sent him the detail of the car and the driver by text message on his cell phone.
I often carry a lot of things with me because of my work. If I forget it in a regular taxi, it's unlikely I'll get it back, and I insist on punctuality. It is paramount to me.
At the headquarters of TaxiJet, all cars are tracked at all times. The service, which launched last June, now receives about 100 bookings a day. Most of TaxiJet's 500 drivers use their own traditional orange taxis, but the company has begun to expand its own fleet of unmarked vehicles to meet demand. Inspired by the American booking service Uber, TaxiJet co-founder Parfait Ouattara believes some Ivorians are ready to pay a bit more for better service.
The concept of TaxiJet is to provide comfortable and safe transportation for Ivorians. Our drivers are qualified, they drive peacefully, and are polite.
Over the past year and a half, 3 other transportation companies have made similar bets in Abidjan, proposing various rates and levels of luxury. Taking one of these services' unmarked car costs an average of 50% more than hailing a traditional orange taxi.
In our taxis, we have electronic tablets on which you can check emails and the city guide. There is also a 4G network available on board.
Congolese entrepreneur Bangzi Goma plans to expand throughout Africa, but he chose to start in Abidjan.
Abidjan est quand même le poumon économique aujourd'hui de l'Afrique.
Abidjan is French-speaking Africa and West Africa's powerhouse with a growth rate around 10%. Africab targets all kinds of customers, but the people most likely to use this service are the middle class.
And it's working. Africab has already had to double its fleet, and the company now has a partnership with a big hotel. So what does this mean for the city's 2,000 orange taxis? Drissa Diaby of the local taxi union says they are trying to improve service. Some taxis now have GPS trackers, others are fixing the meters, though many drivers still prefer to negotiate rates. Diaby says the union has requested a meeting with the Ministry of Transport to discuss the new car services, but he is not too worried about competition.
We go to the working class neighborhoods. We drive 24/7 to help Ivorians. These new companies are not here to help average Ivorians. They are here to help the rich.
As for the cab drivers' notoriously reckless driving, Diaby says that's probably not going to change. He says it's just part of navigating the city's crowded streets. Emilie Yop for VOA News in Abidjan.
Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings, Today Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us here in Washington. Have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords.
Speaking to U.S. senators, CIA Director John Brennan had to answer many questions when he was nominated for the job.
Democrats repeatedly questioned Brennan about the U.S. government's use of armed, unmanned aircraft, known as drones.
Drones are planes flown by people in another location. They have been used by the United States against terrorists in places that are difficult for soldiers to reach.
Americans are debating how drones should be used.
Now, the next time you hear the word drone,
drone.
Your English will be good enough to know what this newsword means.